Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoot Room Sessions.
Welcome to the Shoot Room.
Well, thanks for having me.
Can you tell people who you are and what you do?
So I'm Will Hayler, and I am co-founder of Blue Earth, and we are famous for the Blue Earth Summit. And over the last 5 years, we've been shaping and building this thing that is on a mission to transform the way the world works.
I love, even to start with, your gesticulations of waves already, so
Yeah.
you can tell the waves are going to be such a theme. Will, how on earth did you get there? Take us back to childhood, where you grew up, and bring us to Blue Earth.
Okay, so I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My dad was a helicopter pilot that was stopped from being a pilot through eyesight, but loved helicopters, and then decided he wanted to work in helicopters, and all kinds of different things happened in my childhood, and we moved house all the time, constantly with him, sort of trying to pay for life to stay involved in the dream. And at one stage he put a hangar in the garden, and then these helicopters were coming in to get new radars or electronics upgrades. And so I just around entrepreneurialism from.
And did it feel exciting and energetic?
No, it felt stressful. We were all aware of whether the deal was on or the deal was off, and just sort of, it's just, but the passion was just real. This was a guy who just loved his craft, loved his trade. He learned to fly in the Navy, and then just wanted to take that into the commercial world, and just was passionate about that and passionate about turning it into a business. So I think, I grew up in that entrepreneurial world to say there's always a way to stick with your passion and go in that, and that really rubbed off on me. And weirdly, you're always told by your parents to go in a different route to perhaps the one they did. So he said to me, go and get a real job. Something he never potentially ever felt that he did. Go and work in, whatever it would be, a real job. Go to university, get a real job, and sort of that became sort of the anti. I was never going to do that in hindsight,
Because he was pushing it so hard.
Yeah, he was just saying it would be less stressful. Go and get a career. Go and do the corporate job or whatever that might be. And I think only now in my sort of 40s do I start reflecting. Now I've got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I'm fascinated to see what they're going to do. What's my experience going to be on them? But just looking back at sort of when I was 13, what sort of things affected me, and it was kind of the motivation to be passionate about what you do, but also, if you tell your kids to go left, they're going to go right, aren't they? So that's what I did.
Which direction are you telling yours?
Well, that's it. Interestingly, it skips a generation. My 13-year-old wants to be a pilot. And I worry if there's going to be pilots by the time he's when do you become a pilot? 25? Will there be pilots? And I think that's big part of the excitement that I think in the world that we're living in now. Where are we going to be in 10 years' time? And I don't think anyone.
I think what you're getting with jobs is there will always be, if you're willing to be the best at what you do, be it making tables or ceramics, or there'll be an absolute core of exceptional people. So will there be pilots? Yes, but will solve for the normal pilot. So will commercial airliners probably be way more automated? Yes, but will there be individual bespoke test pilots and private pilots and things like that? Yeah. So I think social media has been a big push for that. If you're exceptional at anything now, you can make a business out of it.
Yeah.
So you just have to make sure your little one becomes an incredible pilot.
But I'm enjoying that journey in terms of, the journey I'm on. I'm still working out what I want to do in life, and it changes.
Me too.
I'm quite comfortable with that, and always have, you have your moments, don't you, where you think, God, what am I doing, and where am I going to be in 10 years' time? But I think actually the reality is you don't know. No. That's exciting.
Even the people that claim they had so I think the distinction is maybe doctors or engineers or people who have very formulaic, structured career paths sometimes have a plan. Most other people, certainly the entrepreneurial ones, even if they claim they've had a career plan, they're just looking back and connecting the dots rather than.
Yeah.
So people will say to me, because my background, data and environment through to what we're doing now. That feels perfectly laid out. No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Twists and turns and opportunity and serendipitous moments and meeting people and changing minds and opinions. So was your route through from childhood to now circuitous? Did it take twists and turns?
Oh, massively, yeah. Well, just like I was saying, growing up, we were moving house every 5 years. You know, that was just part of, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, you live your business, and if your house is for sale because it's paying for the next business or whatever that is. And so growing up, it was always that. And actually, you know, I'm based in, I did the university thing. And then whereabouts did you go? I went to Newcastle and I did politics, purely because I met so many people on my travels that were political. And I wasn't political growing up, but suddenly at age 19, I was sitting in a sort of Costa Rican surf camp, and this Israeli dude was just so political, and for obvious reasons. He had much more real politics going on in his life, but so political. I was like, I wish I had an opinion. I wish I could, you know, you're passionate. And I think that's what's followed my career in its entirety, is passion. So this guy was so passionate, and I suspect he was surfing in Costa Rica, which was probably better than what he would have been doing in 2000, and I think it was year 2000. So he was out there surfing in Costa Rica, living the life he wanted to lead rather than the life he perhaps would have been living at home. But I went and I did politics as a degree with just no other ambition other than to just know about that. And it just happened to be a pretty interesting time. 2000.
I was thinking the other day, how on earth is politics taught now?
Yeah.
Because it's changing by the minute, and it's so the sort of system structures and like pageantry that's existed throughout our parliamentary democracy. The Tories torched that to the ground in the latter years. So it must be a really challenging thing for lecturers to be able to teach now in terms of that, because the historic stuff has so little bearing on now.
But what was interesting is, so I didn't do a politics A level. I did anyway. So year one of a politics degree, you look at humankind, and that's something that we've taken into Blue Earth, is what does savage man look like? If in a society of no rules, how do we operate? What does a savage, animalistic, instinctive human do? And then on top of that, you layer on, and that's why we have politics, to maintain a status quo. And that is something I've really drawn back to in terms of, especially with the climate movement, what would the savage man do? And I think sometimes in the climate debate, you forget that. You forget that actually there's a privilege to caring about the problem, because you're there. And I see that within Blue Earth, and a lot of the people that come, they can afford to care. And what you've actually got to do is bring it back to say, what would that person, that's that desperate person, you know, they're totally, you know, they're not living in Farnham talking about degrowth. You know, they're actually living in India or Brazil, talking about like, I need to better my situation in my.
I need to find water. I need to find food.
And so I do draw back to that politics degree quite a lot in terms of what does society do without rules, and because I think a lot of the climate movement has been about law, stopping, you know, and it needed to happen. But a lot what I saw coming into the climate space is everything we need to stop doing. And from coming in as an entrepreneur, it was all about what you need to start doing. You know, where are we going? How are you going to transfer? How do you make the climate space A, more accessible, and A, more progressive? You know, where are we going? What's next? You know, I find the place that we are in the world now, like, so fascinating. When people talk about tipping points, and immediately you could take a negative view, like, we're at a tipping point of nature decline, biodiversity loss. You know, that's a serious and real thing, and you can spend that, or we're at the same time, we're at a tipping point of energy. We're at the way, you know, when we started Blue Earth, it was the way we live and work, which actually became a bit of a diversion. But actually, we're a huge tipping point in terms of technology, the way we heat our homes, the way we travel, the way we eat. You know, that use of technology that comes in there, I think is massively exciting. I think what we wanted to do is create something that focused on that, with a knowledge of the downside, but a focus on the upside.
I love it. It totally resonates with what we do. So everyone else is advocating be scared of this, all the negatives happening. It's a push factor. Whereas we're like, no, the future could be brilliant. There's so much optimism and hope and reaching for something different. Are you familiar with John Elkington? And
Yes. Yeah,
so we recorded his podcast a week or so ago. It's not quite out yet. And he talks about these societal waves and tipping points and turning points. And he thinks we're right on the cusp of a next one,
Yeah.
you know, the exponential 20s. And we ended up talking to John because he wrote a book called Green Swans. And I read it, which was amazing, about these companies who could have transformative effects. And I wrote to him and said, we might be a green swan, John. We're doing some of the things you're talking about. And we got chatting. He's like, I think you are. Yeah. So he came and talked to us about that. And it's right. There's so much optimism right now. You know, there's and so much energy and momentum in a system. So even look at, we're recording this at the end of January 25, and people are worried about Donald Trump being in the White House and Elon Musk's impact on things. You know, is him coming out the Paris Agreement bad? Yes, of course it is. Are there some negative things happening? Absolutely. But boy, there's more energy around change and different. And, you know, Elon Musk stripping away the massive bureaucracy that is the US machine. I think that's a massive positive.
Yeah.
Like, one of the biggest barriers to progress for the environment in the UK is bureaucracy. Yeah. If you literally half the size of the civil service, more good things would happen.
Yeah.
So I just want more energy working towards change in the system. And almost, I think, you get some negative energy and some positive, but I'd rather have that than inertia. You know, you get a 2008 to 10 period where there's a global financial crisis and just nothing changes or happens. That's when it's a real struggle, because starting that battleship moving's impossible. Changing its direction once it's moving is a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So after politics at uni?
So I ended up setting up a surf company.
Well, that's a natural progression.
Yeah, I mean, and because I was told to get a real job.
When did you start surfing?
So I just grew up doing it, sort of down in Cornwall. Sort of home was it was Dorset, so into the West Country.
Yeah,
and it was just something that I just thought was so cool. You know, I just grew up. You know, when I was sort of teen years, it was just pictures of waves on walls and cutting out magazines, and I just thought that was just the most, you know, it was athletic, it was daring, it was just everything that I thought cool was in my teenage years. Surfing was. So I was lucky enough to go on holidays to Cornwall, where I just was there. So finished university, but during university had worked in the summers as a surf coach, and it was good money. You know, you'd stand up in front of 10 people, keep them safe, keep them happy, teach them a few things, and get paid way more than you would in a pub. And, you know, suddenly you're a surf instructor, and you're quite proud of that job at sort of age 20. So I did that throughout university, and then set up a surf travel company with my lifelong friend, who is co-founder of Blue Earth, a chap called Lindley Lewis. And we just decided that there was a world out there with surfing in it, and a travel company that we could set up. And we went to South Africa. And it was
essentially just so you could keep surfing and go around the world.
Yeah, it was an extension of a lifestyle, but we still thought there was a business within the you know, that was at the time when the surf industry was booming. You know, Quicksilver had, you know, Oxford Street, massive shop. You know, these were the
Rip Curl.
Yeah, these were the big brands, and we were like, this is a big business, and we want to get more people into it, but more than into it. So we went.
Was your dad cursing you at this point when you literally did the exact thing he did?
Yeah, walk out of the room stuff.
Yeah.
You know how the job application's going, and then, you know, and we're like, well, actually, you know, teaching surfing, and I think he was quite cool about it. I think he wasn't one of those sort of coercive, like, you must do this, but I think he was just willing. I think that's what you want for all your kids. You want them to live, you want them to learn the lessons that perhaps he would have done differently. But anyway, so we set up this travel company called Ticket to Ride, and it's still running now, and it was about doing travel differently.
And do you still have it now, or has that been?
Yeah, so it's managed by a team, and we've got guys that have worked in it for 20 years, and it's sort of facilitates a lifestyle, but it's just had its 20-year anniversary, and it's something we're very proud of, and it runs itself, and it was all about having a different approach to travel. And it was we were in South Africa, and it was about getting involved in township projects. It was a big, long 10-week experiences where you'd go to a country, sort of. Well, there's probably a word for it now, but it's sort of like extended travel. Don't just go for a week; go for a long period of time. And you get involved in community projects. You get involved in township, understanding of how because you can't surf all day. You know, 2 hours then you're pretty knackered, and then bit of a break, then then the next day there'll be no surf. So how do you immerse yourself in the culture of that country? And this company, Ticket to Ride, had the ethic of a responsible travel company, that whilst you're there, how are you engaging in township communities? How can you use surfing as a force for good? And we just sort of had this mindset of, township kids don't go surfing. So if you teach them how to surf, they'll get hooked on the right stuff rather than the wrong stuff. And their surf coach will only take them surfing if they stay in school. And so we sponsored this project, and it's since grown into something way bigger called Waves for Change. And the guy we started it with is still doing that. And it's just that mindset of how do you do travel differently? How do you do it better? And so we did that throughout our 20s, 30s, and still it's running now. And that took us on all different paths of, entrepreneurialism, really just bringing other businesses in. And we sort of acquired a business, then we merged with another business. And that was the time in my 30s that I enjoyed the business side. I don't find the business element awkward. And I think some people do. They're like, well, I'm passionate about this thing.
What do you mean the business element?
So we decided that we wanted to turn our surf business into a ski and snowboard business at the same time, and say it's called Ticket to Ride. What else is out there? Right, there's ski and snowboarding. So we merged with another ski company, and that turned into an acquisition, because then you have the sort of tire, like when you're buying a car, you have that sort of tire kicking moment. Well, let's look at your numbers.
The due diligence.
Yeah, and it's kind of a bit of a boxing match, really. And I realised during that scenario that I loved it.
You like the commercial negotiation?
Yeah, I just found that I didn't find it awkward talking about his numbers, my numbers. I loved the fact that we would go hard at it and then have a beer afterwards, because we liked each other. We had the same mindset, but we were business rivals, sort of worthy rivals, sort of thing. We both respected each other.
Competitive collaboration.
Yeah.
I heard this quote the other day that I thought was really pertinent. It said, people think entrepreneurs come up with a brilliant idea and deliver it. They don't. They come up with a brilliant idea and then keep coming up with additional ideas every day.
Yeah.
And that's what you're literally describing this. You had this business, it changed the way things worked, it changed the way travel was approached, but you're also having ideas about how it related to community, how it related to place, how can you expand the offering.
Yeah.
It's never one idea. No. It's how does that idea keep coming?
Yeah, and I think also I was, things do stick with you. I had a point to prove that I could do a less than standard career, but keep up with those that were doing the standard careers. So my university mates, they might have gone and got a job in finance, or they might have got a job in.
What did keeping up mean?
In terms of when you end up going to the pub with them, make sure you bite around as well. Not like, oh, sorry, I chose the lifestyle job. Can you, hopefully it's not my round. You wanted to make sure that you're saying, I'm living the life I want to lead, and I'm still there. I'm not going to work in a bank. I'm not working in a consultancy company. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm creating. I've got real passion for what I'm doing. There's purpose in what I'm doing, and I'm getting paid. Because
you wanted the and, not the or.
Yeah.
So you wanted the lifestyle that you loved and the ability to pay financially, not instead of. Because some people would be like, I just want to be a surfer, and would just go, but then they couldn't have kept up as well.
No, exactly. And there's a lot of people that are in our world that take that, very conscious decision, and who's right, who's wrong. They say, I don't need more in my life.
I want a van and a board, and that's it.
And I'm there, and I'm gonna get paid what I get paid, and I'm gonna live to that level. Whereas I grew up, as we were saying earlier, in a world where it was you're hustling, you're changing, and also you're taking risk. And I think it's very simple mindset that if you take the risk, you want the reward. It's what's the payday, and it's for some people it is lifestyle. But for me, it was business success. So we've always had that sort of chip on our shoulder, if we want to say that we're doing what we want to do, but it's a proper business.
How do you perceive and think about risk? Is it something you look at spreadsheet wise, numbers, nuts and bolts, or is it a feel with you? How do you approach risk?
So across everything I've done, whether it's travel, whether it's events, whether it's media, I always think of the end goal. I think that should happen. And I get really repetitive and stubborn about that end goal and saying that is going to happen. I've just got to work out how. And so that risk gets bounded up in that. And the sort of risk is part and parcel of that. So probably rather foolhardily, and I've had some crashes. There's been no doubt about that. But
every surfer's come off a big wave.
yeah,
right?
well, exactly. Yeah, well, there you go. I've had a few wipeouts then, if you want to put the analogy on it. But the point is I've always had a clear what it should be, what it could be, and then I think you sort of forget about risk, rightly or wrongly. And I think that as I've got older, I've become a bit more aware. I think when you're 20, you don't worry about the risk. You know,
You think you're invincible.
yeah, what's the worst case scenario? Well, I can handle it. And now I think as you get older and you have more responsibilities in your life and you have more dependence within your team, you know, you're actually responsible for other people's careers, which is something that, you know, you grapple with. You know, are the people in your team getting what they want out of this journey that we're all on? So you have to be a bit.
I think risk is really badly understood and managed by people outside of like the hedge fund world, where they've got people who are just risk is their life, and like professional poker players and things. I think people talk about risk management, but it's really misunderstood.
Yeah.
So I, every so often I'll deep dive a topic or a subject to try and learn everything I can. And one of the world's recognized experts in risk is a big wave surfer. I don't remember their name, but they surf like the 100-foot waves.
Yeah.
And they're like, and the guy's also a big snowboarder as well. And it's like,
Garrett McNamara.
is that who it is?
Yeah.
So when they talk about, because their risk management is mistake dead.
Yeah.
So in terms of their approach to risk, they describe it exactly as you talk about. They have a set goal, they're committed to it, they consider what might happen, but once they're committed, they've realized I've managed the risk as best as possible, I'm there. Yeah. So it's really interesting that clarity of thought, it's a bit like the positive manifestation of stuff. Yeah. If you say you are going to achieve this, you have the confidence to speak it and you talk it into existence with conviction and you make a decision each day to move closer to it, you've got a hell of a lot better chance of that happening.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think we've jumped around doing different things because we also have realized at the time where things are limited. You know, there's a limitation. This amazing travel journey that we set up in South Africa, 10 weeks going around the coast, helping out local communities, learning to surf, doing all this stuff. We knew that's not mass tourism. You know, there is a limit to that.
Yeah, it's not meant to be, right? It can't be.
Yeah, so
it's not 600 rooms at a hotel for week after week.
And I think so. We've sort of jumped off things, and some things have survived when we're off it. And I think that's when you know it's a good idea. Something that you created is still going, you know, today. And that's and then other things.
Once said, if you have to be in the business making the decisions every day, you don't have a business, you have a job.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And so other things have been, you know, you need to be there and pushing it uphill, because everything, you know, if it doesn't exist and you're making it happen, I think that's been a sort of a driving force to us, is that mindset of make it happen. Like I don't really believe in that much luck. I sort of look back on 20 years and then I'm looking forward to the next 20 years, knowing that luck is, you don't plan for luck, and you almost don't ever. You sometimes you see these football coaches and they don't celebrate a goal. Those are my favourite guys. In the dugout, and they don't celebrate it because they plan for it.
Create a situation where success is inevitable.
Yeah, and those are the coaches. I know that there's sort of the bravado that comes with football, and you just sort of, you got to be seen to be passionate for the fans and all that kind of stuff. But the coaches that sit there and barely blink when it happens, and those are the ones that probably were the ones that practiced that on the training pitch again and again and again. And so what, from my perspective in terms of risk, luck, and all those sort of things that sort of you get reflective on in life, is it's all planning, but it's all planning around a sort of an idea that you think should happen. And that sometimes things that you think should happen, perhaps in reality shouldn't happen, but you only work that out once you put it out in the world. And I've been doing that in different ways for my entire career.
When you were, especially in that world, when you were recruiting and finding people to work in the team, presumably a lot of people you're encountering were those outdoor enthusiasts, the surfers, the snowboarders and things like that. How could you tell whether someone was just a cool character and good at surfing, or whether they'd make a good employee? Because you have both, right? You love that side of it, but you're clearly prepared to work and graft and push through.
Yeah.
How did you tell which one you were getting when you were recruiting, and did you ever get it wrong?
We got it wrong all the time. We got it wrong all the time.
So I think every founder really is a recruiter.
Yeah.
If you want to grow a business, you've got a recruitment problem.
Yeah.
People that try and outsource it all, it doesn't work because it's not your business, it's not your culture.
Yeah.
So I think my biggest job is recruitment, really.
So within surf and snowboarding, we did work out eventually that the big value add that we were offering to the resort manager was the fact that they love snowboarding and that's what they do. Or the if we open up tours in Indonesia, that they can live in Indonesia and go surfing every day. So we worked that out. And then when I took it into media and took it into creative agencies, then you're hiring like on real talent. You're a top designer or you're a top tech whiz and all that kind of stuff. And then, but still that lifestyle element. And I think that's something that people, especially in the last 5 years, have forgotten. That it is a choice. Like there's always been the lifestyle choice out there and there's always been a career choice out there. I took a conscious decision that I didn't want to be a management consultant, but now within Blue Earth, they're lined up for Blue Earth. They can't wait for all this change in auditing that's going on.
Converging, right?
Yeah, and you see their ethic, and then you end up getting that big wave surfer that's going to inspire this connection with nature, and we put those two together, and that creates an interesting environment and an interesting event. But what I think gets lost in the last 5 years is there is a choice. There's a lifestyle choice and there is a purely financial choice. And there are some people that will just grind it out for money. And there are other people that need to have a bit more purpose in what they do. And there are other people that say, I just want to live my life and I'll take what I need.
It's a really interesting time because we're just recruiting for a new CFO. And we were very, very fortunate to have the parent company CFO come and support us for a couple of years while we grew. And she's now moving on to her next adventure. Amazing lady called Ellie. But it's the first time we've recruited at that very, very senior level with the company, the brand, the reach. Our portfolio is north of 150 million now. We've got some real traction out there. The candidates we've got coming in for that CFO role, we've got people who are running multi-billion pound hedge funds. We've got high street bank directors. We've got people going, I'm prepared to take a 50-60% pay cut because I want what I do to matter. I want that better lifestyle. I don't want to be in the city every day. I don't want to be in London every day. I've got one amazing CFO at hedge fund who wants to move to Scotland so we can climb hills all day and work on something he cares about. So I think you're absolutely right. There was that lifestyle choice, there's that business choice. I think better now than ever before, you can do both at the same time. Yeah. And that's what's super exciting for the next generation.
Yeah, and I think when we started Blue Earth, the tagline, all of these sort of platforms that we create, you've got to come up with a tagline, always, even for yourself, just remember what you're doing. And we started Blue Earth on this really simple ethic, which was get outdoors, be healthy, live more sustainably. And we're like, well, who doesn't want to do that? That is mass appeal, those things.
When you settle on a line like that, is it the rhythm that you like saying it with? Does it invoke a feeling in you? How do you know when you've hit the sweet spot with something like that?
Because it doesn't change, and you also and you believe in it, and it was just something that we were doing anyway. Like in our career,
that's so important. Yeah. Something we were doing anyway. So when we hit our values were about environment, impact, adventure, and together.
Yeah.
So loads of people go away for a corporate in big sectors and say, oh, we'll have a 3-day away day with the director team. Someone really senior writes the words on the wall and goes, there are our new values.
Yeah.
That's not what we worked for a year, and then we asked people, what does it feel like to work here?
Yeah.
And they talked about environment, impact, adventure together. So how on earth did a passionate surfer and owner of a travel company get from there to even start in Blue Earth?
So I had a 10-year movement into media. I was saying growing up, I had surf magazines on my wall, and I had the opportunity to buy a surf magazine for next to nothing. I thought I'll sell more surf holidays if I own a surf magazine.
How did that come about?
They called me and they said, do you want to advertise? And I said, well, I don't want to advertise, but we want to do editorial. We want to write knowledgeable editorial about Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and say this, these are the things, these are the do's and don'ts, this is how you get there. And the guy selling the advertising was like, I don't think we sell that. And so I put the phone down going, oh, they must sell that. Like that we're offering to do the editorial, and and that was a more sort of aligned with the title. And our web developer at the time, we'd just done 3 acquisitions within travel. And it's always, it's good news for me, it's bad news for them. They've got to build another website. They're suddenly and so in a sort of web developer-y way, he went, and I said, well, I bet they're not selling many ads. And I bet that business is doing next to nothing. And the web guy goes to me, well, why don't we take them on as well then, Will? Thinking it was a joke. And I was like, well, I'll give him a ring. And I said, well, yeah, I'll give him a ring, and I'll just say, does your owner, we don't want to do the advertising, but does your owner want to sell it? And he couldn't wait to get rid of it. He was like, yeah, you know, bundling out the door. He had a sort of a running title, a cycling title. He had this surf title. Like Wavelength is Europe's original surf magazine. You know, it was 1981. It was just, you know, right ahead of its time, and it was just something I read for years. And I was like, right, okay, well, we'll take it on. So we bundled it up, and we suddenly had this surf magazine. I had no idea how to run a surf magazine. I just thought it was cool to have it in the sort of.
Were there many staff there that you took on?
Yeah, there was an editor, and there was a photographer, and then I already had, through running the travel companies, we had a designer and we had a developer, and it became a passion project for them. You know, we're running Wavelength. How exciting is that? And so we did it for 10 years, but I quite quickly realized that there's a reason why it was cheap. And there's a reason why the owner couldn't wait to offload it, is because it wasn't making any money. And so at the same time of trying to innovate how you make this title, and we turned Wavelength away from being a magazine title into a brand. You know, that was the value in it to me. There's a brand, Wavelength. Everyone in the surf world's heard of it. What can you do with a surf brand? And we turned it into an events business, and we thought that we were filling cinemas with old school surf films, and suddenly we'd turn up in London, and we'd rent the biggest cinema we could find with the latest surf film, and 400 people would turn up. And so suddenly we were like, oh, okay, maybe Wavelength's an events business. And then I'm thinking to myself, well, the chip on my shoulder I had, this sort of imposter syndrome of the surf world, is we were based in Newquay. We're not in LA, and we're not in Hawaii. We're not in Sydney. You know, these were where the big surf titles run. And what are we doing in here? And what I felt I was doing, and it's something that we've sort of come back to, is breaking the surf clique. You know, who's allowed in the surf world? You know, how often do you surf? You know, there's the parallel between the climate world and the surf world. You know, are you a surfer, or are you an authentic member of the climate community? And you're like, well, I'm just a fan. I just want to be here. And I think what you're doing is cool.
So there's so many echoes of you breaking cliques and making things more accessible. Why do you want to open them up rather than just sit in a clique and go? Because some people see a group and go, I want to be in that group, and get in it and say, oh, I'm happy I'm here now. Yeah. But you didn't want to do that. You wanted to say, let's open this up and bring groups together. Yeah. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think I've always seen cliques as exactly what they are, and I've never felt like I'm in one, ever. You know, even at the sort of the most core of my surfing days of just living and breathing surfing, and, you know, knowing professional surfers, knowing world champions, it was always the clique I was wanting to be part of, but never felt like I was part of. And so my job was to be the outsider that made, actually, do you know what? This person's pretty friendly. You know, this legend of the surfing world who looks terrifying is actually incredibly shy. Just talk to him or talk to her. You know, the media outset there is that macho environment. And I think in the climate space, it's the same. They're so knowledgeable, so clever. I can't be in it. And I think so we were running Wavelength for 10 years, doing these events. And then like all businesses, what's the point? How many waves can you put on a page? You know, it's another wave. And I'd show members of my family the latest surf magazine, and they would sort of flick it and go, look, same as the last one. And I'm like, wow, it's different because this photographer's, you know, got a different story.
Look at that composition, that angle. Yeah.
And they were like, no, it's the same as the last one. And then I was like, well, okay, what's the point in Wavelength? We're not Hawaii, we're not LA, we're not Australia. What's the point in Wavelength? And something that Britain is brilliant at doing. We've got incredible NGOs. We've got, you know, Surfers Against Sewage has got an amazing story. Yeah. And we were like, well, let's bring in that space, you know, all this pollution that's going into our waters. And you've got Chris Hines, the founder. You've got Hugo Taghome.
Hugo was still there then, right?
Yeah, Hugo was, and he was very open to us. You know, he's like, great, we've got some new energy in the surf space. You know, it's you know, he's a guy that doesn't get pulled into cliques too much. And he was, you know, so we were like, well, let's give some editorial to Hugo. And then it's just something
like even with him bringing in Richard from Iceland and John Koo from Interface at the time, and they were so open. You know, I remember being at events with Hugo, and the now King's dropping in. Because of Hugo, one of my favourite stories, I played Jenga with the King down at the event they did with Finisterre.
Yeah.
And it's because so many people would have said, oh, no, what are you doing? Why are you? But he could interact with everybody and was open. If you can help give us more platform, greater reach for what Surfers Against Surgery are doing. He was miraculous in that role, I thought.
Yeah,
He was brilliant.
and inspiring. And then you're thinking, there's a campaign here. And within marketing, so to make Wavelength work, as well as doing events, we became a creative agency. And we would do all kinds of different creative briefs, whether or not it was making a Land Rover look cool with a surfboard.
And are they those same core group of people you originally had?
Yeah.
And you're repositioning the service to others as well as yourselves?
Yeah, and then we started recruiting. We were talking about recruiting earlier, and we started like real talent to say, actually, our clients are based in London, but we're based on a beach in Newquay. We're making this surf magazine, but we're making the Mini Clubman cool. Or Tesla came out, and it was suddenly like, we've all seen it. How many car adverts have got a surfboard? But if you're a surfer, you know, they strapped to the roof the wrong way round, you know. And so we were like, we will create authentic surf content for brands. And
how did the interaction with those first sort of name brands work? Did you already have those networks, or how did you get that business flowing in?
So that's just knocking on doors, but having the brand of Wavelength. So if someone was saying, right, you know, if a PR firm would say, right, we need to engage with the surf world, you know, their metrics of, you know, where's the surf authority, that was always Wavelength. You know, that was the brand that it, you know. And I think there's something to be said for if you're always blowing your own trumpet, people go, you know, they get bored of the tune of that. And so if they're like, well, I've heard of Wavelength, I want to work with Wavelength now, what can you do with me? They've made half that decision already.
Yeah, the credibility is baked in.
Yeah, so we use that. Yeah, we use that, and then, you know, in the actual fact, it wasn't as big as a business as I thought.
Did you overpay? I know you said you got it for a steal. So
yeah, no. The idea of doing shoots for Land Rover.
Oh, I see.
Shoots for you know, thing, and then so you sort of boil it down to go, we're doing less of that. And then one of the jobs that I won, which was the precursor to Blue Earth Summit, was I won BNP Paribas CEO conference. Can we do the branding for it? And I was like, well, I've got 5 designers. Yeah, we'll do it. So I was sort of putting the suit on, going down to London, talking to this bank around getting all the CEOs, and it was of all the companies we've heard of, whether it's Vodafone, Havas, you know, their job was to get every CEO into a hotel in Paris and get them with an investor and get them with an analyst, and they would have this 3-day thing. And we did the programming, we did the staging, we did all the designs, and suddenly we were in the center of this incredibly powerful corporate event. And there's me in the corner as I was the account manager because it was the biggest account we had, going, how on earth are we in Paris running this thing with all these CEOs running around? And we ran that for BNP Paribas for 4 years. And it really struck me that there was a lot of power in the room, but a lot of just all it was money, literally money, money, money. And then on the other side of my world, I had Wavelength, which was all it was connection to the outdoor, connection to nature. And at the same time, we got invited to go to the Web Summit. It's this incredible conference, and their tagline is "Where the future goes to be born." And it was these Irish lads who had started this thing in the university in Dublin, and they built up this Web Summit, and now it's 70,000 people going to a tech conference in Lisbon, and Lisbon had paid them millions to move it from Dublin over to Lisbon, and it's just this incredible like buzzing. Like, that's what a conference looks like. So I'm running a CEO conference that's as dry as a bone, and it's just about money. These Irish guys are running this tech conference that is as buzzing as it's possible, you know, where the future goes to be born. It's all about the internet. Wow, bang, bang, bang. And it's all going on. And I'm running a surf magazine. And I thought that there was a link to all 3 of them. And sometimes when we went out to get investment for Blue Earth, people are like, I get the link, but I can't really get the link. But I've always understood the link, and I'm probably sort of going to lose your listeners now. But you're running a surf magazine, there's a tech conference, and there's a BNP dry as ever investment conference. And I thought that there is a different conference in there that isn't the World Wide Web. It's just for the world. And what does that look like? And I pitched that to the guys at Web Summit, and they were like, they loved it, and they kept saying their Irish accent, this is grand, this is grand. And we were out there in Dublin for 10 days hacking, you know, doing a sort of web style hackathon. And then COVID hit and everything stops. And it just so happened that, you know, their deal with the Lisbon government was, as long as someone walks in, we'll pay you the millions of pounds to host it here. And they're like, well, no one's going to walk in. So that was their worry, and they needed to focus on their business. But me, my business partners and co-founders, Linley and Guy, were sitting there in lockdown with this idea of a conference that put the world, not the World Wide Web, put the world center. But it involved the investors, and it involved the sports and the all these authentic, like, outdoor people that we all know, the big wave surfers, and all the academics, you know, the Hugo Tagholmes, and he'll like being called an academic, but, you know, all the John Elkingtons. And suddenly, how do you mash these people together? And then we invented this thing. And what are we going to call it? You know, let's give it a grand name. You know, Blue Earth Summit. You know, suddenly it was just brilliant. We'll do.
Was that one and done as a title, or did you workshop a load of ones you dismissed?
I think we had the idea of it, and it was Linley who came up with the idea. And it's always nice to remember who thought of the name. And he just went Blue Earth Summit, and you're like, that sounds. You know, it's one of those things, and I think in the climate world, it's one of those things that people assume they've already heard of.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I've already heard of that, but they're actually thinking of Blue Planet, I think, is what they're probably thinking of. But Blue Earth Summit just sort of got invented in lockdown, and we ran it straight out of lockdown, and it was about redefining how we live and work. That was a title that I think we got rid of it as quickly as we started, but that is what we started Blue Earth with.
Such a serendipity to that, though, because it was the right time. Like, I can see how frustrating it must have been to have that idea, be sat on it in COVID, but coming out of it was the exact right time to explode out of there.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the convergence of the different parts of your world and business and lives, that's so similar to oxygen conservation.
Right.
So it is my background in performance sport and actually a high performance culture, data and environment, which was the crux of uni, and like my passion was whitewater kayaking as a kid. I had no coast, so I went on rivers instead.
Yeah.
So those conversions, so environment, data, sport and culture, the frustration with the public sector not moving things. When I left the environment agency, I had a team of 450 people, £100 million budget, but I was doing nothing. It was just politics. There was no impact. I really wanted to change things. I then went and ran a green engineering firm for a few years, and it's the convergence of each of those things with the support of Oxygen House that no one else without that background would have seen that point of convergence.
Yeah.
No one else could have started what you've done because it needed every bit of that jigsaw. Our CFO Ellie will love this because it's her favourite analogy. You'd got that Trivial Pursuit wedge, and because you had all the sections, that allowed you to create the whole.
Yeah.
If you hadn't have had that, Blue Earth wouldn't be what it was.
Yeah.
Because without the recognition of the investment and the power and the authenticity of the sea, and you seeing what people could achieve together, and you willing to break those cleats down,
Yeah.
couldn't be a thing.
Well, definitely not. And it was. And so we've been going for 5 years now, and I don't think I'm an events guy. And we've got events people now. We are an event, and we do need to produce a stage, and we do need to do all of those things. And so, you know, if you had to put it in a pigeonhole, we are an event. But I don't want to create a big event. I want to create a movement that I'm hugely excited about, which is, what does change look like? What does better look like? And we were talking about sort of politics as a sort of foundation to everything I've been involved in, which is human mindset. And I think when you talk about climate, people can talk in their own silo, for example, the climate space or the NGO space, the business space, and the public sector space, and they've all got their challenges within that. But also you look at people living their own life, and a lot of the people that have the biggest thing to say about climate are in a position of privilege to care about climate. And I think that there's something in this human ambition that covers all levels of society, which is better. Like, what does better look like?
Are you able to pinpoint why you're always want to improve something or make it better? Because every chapter of your life, you've just, how can I improve this? Do you know why?
Well, I think that's DNA human. Like, even if I don't mind talking about it, I'm quite extrovert. You get a lot of people that you know in the world, and then you say, what are you up to? And they say, just a few bits and pieces. And you're like, they can be incredibly humble people, and you go and turns out they're doing something amazing. Or you get someone that you assume is doing something amazing, they're actually doing nothing at all. Whereas I've always been, if I'm thinking it, I'm saying it, which can get you in hot water a lot of the time. But I do believe that everyone quietly is looking for something better. And I also think that the climate agenda is sometimes is the mission of very entitled, wealthy people, and which I don't think is a bad thing, by the way. But I also think that it can forget the people that are living right on the front line. And we talk about, go to these global conferences, you go to a COP, and you go, actually, you've got to remember where the front line is.
We've turned down everything international so far because I've felt such a compelling hypocrisy about going. And we're not going to be able to do that forever, because I've been asked to talk at some amazing things. And it's like, you're constantly asking yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze on this? Like, I talked to John Elkington about it, because he's been to tons of countries around the world. And I said, does that weigh heavy? And he went, no, because I honestly can say I've had better impact by going than not.
100%.
And that's the thing we keep testing. So I think the sweet spot will be, so I got asked to go speak in Washington in January, but it was such a small group. I was like, it really can't be worth the impact.
Yeah.
So, we might do New York Climate Week. I'm not sure, but that's the thing, because we try and be really, really candid and transparent about everything we do. So if I'm going to go to the US and talk about something, I'm going to publish on it. We're going to film what we're doing. We're going to share it to try and amplify and give as much to people as we can. But be honest about the fact, we got on a plane to do this, and that's not without its consequences.
Yeah, and but in terms of, are you making, I think to bring it into that word better. That's all we're actually trying to do. And why are we trying to do that? Because I think everyone's doing that, and I think everyone's doing that across. Whether it's a Amazonian rainforest farmer that's saying, why are you cutting down that rainforest? And they go, well, because I'm going to try and feed my family. You look at that hierarchy of needs in human existence, and it's Maslow, isn't it?
So it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
And he is, and you just sort of, you want in your life to get as far up that hierarchy as you can. But on a basic level is, where am I eating? Where am I sleeping? How am I getting around? What's my access to information? And I think that is all hugely changing. And as we sort of build Blue Earth into its 5th edition, we're much more aligned to an innovation event than we are a climate event, because what we're definitely not is creating awareness of the problem. Like, we're there for that. And I think when we're in Bristol,
who doesn't know? That's my thing about it. Oh, we need to do more awareness. No, we don't. Everyone knows.
Yeah.
Like, I totally agree. I love the fact that you guys are about the future, not reflecting on the past and just saying, oh, woe is us again.
Yeah.
It's about what can we actually do and take action.
Yeah, but for the first 3 years, like, someone had the analogy of Blue Earth when I explain it, they go, it sounds like you were building the plane whilst flying it. And we definitely were. Like, we had this idea, which was get outdoors, be healthy, live more sustainably. And then in year 1, redefine how we live and work. And in year 5, we are very clear on our narrative, which is transform the way the world works. And that's a lofty ambition. And all we're doing is bringing people together with the power to do that within their work and have that purpose and have that passion and that ambition. But transform the way the world works is actually a bit of a guarded signal to what we're not doing, because transform the way the world works is the transformational bit is innovation. How do you really change stuff? Do you go straight to politics and set up a law? I think you bring in your rule breakers to transform stuff. And the way the world works is it's just saying to the traditional climate community, just remember the way the world works. You can start a very worthy campaign, like just stop whatever, and start what? And that's what Blue Earth has become a complete totem pole for, is what are we going to start? Yeah. And then who are the change makers? And what I saw within the climate movement, which, it's been, like I was saying, it's been going, we're on COP30 or about to go into COP30. It's been going and going and going. And the fatigue and the anger and all the sort of anxiety that comes with it, that's all well placed. But then who are the people that are going to come into the space that are going to make stuff happen? And they're not always the people that the climate world want to see. No, you know, you look at the way the world is working at the moment. It's if you're in the third sector and you are focused on political change, like you can take a break for the next 4 years. Actually, set the alarm clock for 4 years time and go. And I think that's a sort of a trait of the climate movement is they just know what they know, and it's probably more than everybody else. And in fact, often it's more than everybody else. And when they hear what they don't want to hear, they put their fingers in their ears and they go, don't want to know, don't like it, not good.
You see it, but look at the football managers who are like, oh, don't care about this date stuff, don't want to know, don't want to know. And then you look at Brighton doing what they're doing. You look at Brentford doing what they're doing. You look at all the people who are applying data and analytics and exchanging the world. Oh, but I'm a traditional. I don't want to touch that. It is that meeting of the minds. It's those conceptual collisions that you described in the foundations of Blue Earth, bringing different ideas from different places together. They can transform things massively. And if that's what we need to get the existential and exponential growth and change we need in a sustainable, regenerative way, we often get it with people like... in community, I don't want to see change, or I like it as it is. Okay, but how do we give a better future for that next generation? And that's what's so exciting about you guys.
Well, then I suppose definitely within that status quo thing, the political agenda is all about status quo.
That's literally what it's for.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't interrupt because you had an amazing flow at the start, but you talked about the politics bringing that. That's what the public sector is for. It is literally meant to stop things changing at pace.
Yeah, exactly right. And so then we talk about sort of the climate movement is very knowledgeable, very small world, very broad, like big-minded, but not sort of open-minded.
Yeah, no. We know best. Stay away. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think
it used to be so anti-business.
Yeah, and they've got a point. They've got plenty of examples where businesses overstep, and I think we all know that.
And still now, water companies now are literally pumping shit into the rivers and claiming they're doing the right thing for the environment.
Yeah, and I think what the climate agenda has become overly politicized, and it's an amazing club to bash. If you're on the left, it's an amazing club to bash the right with, and you've got examples, you've got a complete metaphor to all the wrong that is in the world.
In the last few weeks, you've got the right bashing the left about it, haven't you? Now, look, Labour announcing a third runway, and you've got the Tories going, "How dare you do this to the environment?" It's just,
and I think what Blue Earth is doing is, rather than it just turn into an argument and between third sector, public sector, and then the role of the private sector. Because I think there's broad agreement that the private sector's got a huge role to play in building a better future for people and planet. And I think they're understanding the benefits of that. And I think the work that you guys are doing is an exact example of that. But you still need to get them together and what connects them. And I think, net zero is hugely politicized. The carbon market, there's a distrust there, and there's a real opportunity with nature actually to bring people in, and actually what you're doing in nature is a complete metaphor that we all understand. You all grow up with this. I'd say we all, but I believe the majority of people grow up with a respect and a love and a joy around nature, around what it can be. And I think the role of nature within finding common ground is massive. And then what you've also got to understand is how many people don't have access to it. And that's when the role of the sports people come in and say, actually, do you know what? I'm going to broaden the net of people that get outside, that reconnection. And so what we're doing within Blue Earth is finding ways to reconnect the working world and using sport, adventure, not the path you expected to take, but you got to the end goal eventually, and nature, and getting people to just find common ground. Because how do you get people to agree? You find things they agree with, and I think that's when there's that movement building, that there's a respect and love for nature, and there's an access to it, and we sort of cover all those points. But then it's terms of, and then how are we going to make stuff happen? And if you just lean on a politician, and some of the people you've had on your show, they spent years in that world, and their frustration is the difficulty to make stuff happen. So then who do you need to come in? You need these maverick thinkers, these people that are, they're nuts, and they're egos. These climate events that I go to, and everyone goes, don't have an ego. No one's allowed an ego, but the bigger the better, in my opinion. If we're really serious about change, the people that make change, and they're on the screens probably way too much at the moment, in fact, definitely way too much at the moment, they are egos. They're nutters.
You heard Eric Schmidt, who was the chief exec at Google.
Right.
He talks about you need, his distinction is divas and knaves. But when he says divas, he's talking about those same egos.
Yeah.
And he said, you need the perfect number of divas in a business. And they're the people that make the magic happen. And then you need enough knaves to ensure the business is run and appropriate and legal and everything that's there.
Yeah.
But without the divas, you've got nothing.
Yeah. And I think that, to use your description, the divas have been almost shut out of the climate movement. You know, this is a movement of knowledge. This is a movement of rules. This is all the things that when you leave education and you sign your career, you either turn that way or you go that way. The people that are going to go and disrupt markets and create things that don't exist anymore. You know, what is going to exist in 20 years' time that we're not even talking about, and who's the person that's created it? It's probably the different person that's written a book on the state of nature. You know, they are different people.
They are.
But you need them if you're really serious about transforming the way the world works and putting the planet at the center of that and saying, well, you know, we all live on this world. We all believe, well, I actually don't think we all believe, but there's a good number of people, there's a tipping point of people that see that we've overstepped it. How are we going to realign ourselves, resync with nature in a way that everybody understands? You're going to have to involve someone that's thinking outside of the box and is probably saying 10 of the wrong things, but 2 of the right ones. And then, what did you say, that the people that are going to support them?
The divas and the knaves.
Yeah, the knaves are going to go, they like those 2 things, not the other 10, but those 2 things you said, let's make them happen. And then when people talk about, and I'm sure these are people you have sitting here, people that really make change happen, you know, they are relentless people, and they're built of something different. And those are the people that we're saying, get on our stage and come and join this movement that is transforming the way the world works. And that's what broadens it. And it doesn't become this politicized, exasperated, anxious thing that says the world's got it all wrong and we're all doomed. We're saying there's hope, there's positivity, there's passion, and there's energy, and let's enjoy ourselves. And that's why people enjoy coming to Blue Earth, is that they feel they're part of a festival for the future. You know, they're connected to, and they're saying that these are people that really believe in what they're doing. They're passionate at what they're doing. They're coming at life in different angles. And I think there's a real role for what you're doing, which is putting nature front and center, and say that is the metaphor. That is the barometer for life on Earth. And I think people can get on board with that. One of the interesting things about is who we get on stage at Blue Earth. And it's always meant to be the unusual suspects, because for 3 years of building,
the unexpected is what makes it special.
Yeah. For 3 years of building in Bristol, we wanted to get it right. We wanted to be established within the climate space and be accepted by that dynasty. You know, the big legends of the game. We were talking about John Elkington earlier. You know, people that said that legitimately can say, I invented the word sustainability. And so for the first 3 years, we're like, we need you, John Elkington.
Building the foundation.
Yeah, we need the hardcore, we need the legit, we need the academics, we need all the people that have been there for 40 years. Because the first thing that someone that's been there for 40 years in climate, the first thing they'll say to you when they meet you is go, do you know what? I was involved in sustainability before it was even called sustainability.
Yeah.
And
before it was cool.
Yeah, and then we can come on to sort of what that actually does in terms of creating a club. You're like, well, God, I wasn't alive 40 years ago. You know what? Sort of
intimidating.
And suddenly you're like, well, like, this is a club that I'm not involved in. And I think that's something that, as we built Blue Earth, we've understood is an opportunity to break that mold and actually widen the net. And then this year we ended up with Seb Vettel on stage. You know, how on earth has Blue Earth Summit got Seb Vettel, a petrol-head, multiple world champion guy?
Was that a real pinch yourself moment?
Yeah, and we decided this is a guy called John Brown, who is a big sort of talker within the climate space. And just when he talks at events, everyone he's one of those guys that people resonate with. And he got involved in Blue Earth way before we were established, at the point when you just need people to say yes. And John Brown was one of those guys. And he's mates with Seb Vettel, and he goes, I think I'd get Seb Vettel. And I think, that's what it's all about. And I think when you're in the event space, we never wanted to be in the event space. We wanted to be in the sort of create a movement, a movement of people on a mission to transform the way the world works. So we're not an event, we're a movement. And so it's all about people bringing people in. He goes, I think I could get Seb Vettel. I went on a camping holiday with him. And they're like, what? you're like, well, hold that thought, John. Can you get Seb Vettel? And I think one of those things is we've got this space where it's like, bring your famous friend, and John's famous friend is Seb Vettel. And Seb said, well, I'll do the talk with my mate John. I'll turn up at 9. I won't have any time for interviews afterwards, and I'll be gone by 9:30. And we were like, well, okay, we'll take it. We'll take it. That's a big name. And he wanted to talk about bees on racetracks, and you're like, this could be nonsense. This could, but it's Seb Vettel, so we'll go with it. He turned up at 9. He did his talk, and he didn't leave till 5. He was just immersed in this space. And I sat down with him afterwards and say, why are you here? And he says, well, I've created a platform for myself and a career for myself in a very set, and a lot of these sports people are the same. They've got good at one thing. They've been ultra focused. They've had a load of people around them, and then they've come out of the sport at, mid to late 30s, and they're looking for their own independence and looking for things that interest them. And he is a guy that is saying, and I'm interested in this change of the way the world works. That I want in on that, and I've got a platform. He's got millions of followers. He's got millions of pounds, and he can actually say what part of the next chapter of his life, and probably there's going to be 2 or 3 chapters. Now that's sort of a thing within professional sport. What's he going to do from his 30s to his 50s and his 50s to his 70s? And he is completely engaged in the transformation of the way the world works, and that connection to nature, connection to the outdoors. And what's great about Seb Vettel is that he isn't afraid to turn up at a climate event, whereas so many sports people are. And because this mindset of, are you allowed to be here? Are you allowed to be on this stage? Are you allowed to be on that podcast? Because actually, by the way, you've got rich and famous by racing around a racetrack. But that's such a miss in the climate world, because that is, F1 has a global following. It's a hugely successful media platform. It engages people, it inspires people. And if they are saying that there's a better way of doing things, and you think about all the things that we need to change in the way that we live, we need to change the way we eat, we need to change the way we build houses, we need to the way we travel. And who are the most technically minded people? Who are the most gifted people within motorsport? They're probably working in F1. Now, how can they use their skills to reduce their impact on the world? And I think the climate movement needs to say, well, we'll have a bit of that. Why is the climate agenda so uncool? And why does it only attract the academics? And why does it only attract the campaigners? Why isn't it bringing the most technically gifted engineering minds to say, we've got to change that? We don't need to be running cars on fossil fuels anymore. We're going to change it over the next however many years. And so come on in, Seb Vettel, and bring your engineers, and that is what Blue Earth has become a sign for. And he's engaged in that. And it's warming that he turns up at an event and didn't leave for 8 hours, and
that's because he authentically wanted to be there with what he found.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. So we talked about Blue Earth a lot, but can you visualize it for people in terms of scale, number, how it's developed over the years, and what your hopes for this year are?
So the scale has always been to put climate front and center as the most exciting, opportunistic thing that you could go to. So we were looking at Web Summit, that's where we invented it. We invented Blue Earth within those offices, and they've got 70,000 people coming to it. So we're nowhere near that scale. We're sort of 5,000 people a day is what we're set up for this year. And that's quality people. That is people that are paying for tickets. They're invested in it. Their work is paying for them to be there, and they're looking for something out of it. They're looking to do a deal. So we're still very small, but our mindset is, and our mission is, to transform the way the world works. So once we're in London now, that was a good move for us. We're in a tier 1 city. We've got public sector, third sector, and a lot of the private sector.
Was it an obvious choice to make that move, or did you wrestle with it? What was the thing that...
Well, I think Bristol was a phenomenal place to incubate an idea.
Culturally, it feels right, doesn't it? Southwest, cool city, vibrant, new, exciting.
Radical city at the forefront of change. That's how we promoted it. And we used to get people to come down to Bristol, and it is quite accessible as a sort of,
it's a really cool place.
Yeah, but what you ended up doing in Bristol, too much in hindsight, was getting pulled down rabbit warrens. Redefine the way we live and work. Oh, great. Can we do a 4-day week? Can we work from home? It's amazing how many people put that sort of question to me. And that's not what Blue Earth is about. We're here to put innovation front and center, to find and support entrepreneurs, to get startups involved, and to create markets, and use business as a force for good. And that isn't about where you work, how many days you work. That became sort of.
I'm not a big fan of a 6-day week, never mind a 4. So, I'm more 7. We haven't got time to piss about. We need to be pushing this hard. And I use the surfer's analogy of that. So people outside of OC will say, oh, you guys work too hard, you work too much. No one tells a professional surfer they're going surfing too much. Yeah. If you love what you do and you genuinely have found the right role, it's not work, it's life.
100%. So we were getting too sidetracked into that debate. And so the move to London was around it. Startups are the sort of the lifeblood of Blue Earth, and you bring your idea to Blue Earth, you bring your solution to Blue Earth, and a lot of those are startups. And then we attach investment to those startups. And so there's more investors in London, and investors are a different breed. And not all investors are interested in climate. In fact, we believe, probably over exaggerate it, that none of them are interested in climate. All of them are interested in money. And that's not true. But if you take that approach and you take you have that sort of lens, it really means that you are focused in. If you're asking someone for money in the private sector and also the public sector to a point, people want to see a return.
100%. So literally, that's the thing that one of our colleagues flagged this a few weeks ago. The environment sector for years has said, oh, we want to talk about investment. They never ever were willing to talk about a return. Yeah. What they meant was, give us money.
Yeah, you owe us.
You owe us. It should be philanthropy. Even when they changed the language, they still meant gift, donation, philanthropy. Yeah. Lots of. I love the NGO space, and I've done so much with Wildlife Trust and Rivers Trust and the Woodland Trust. Brilliant organisations, but they're only just now barely starting to recognise the need to provide a return.
100%.
And it's not investment if you're not sending one back.
And you look at some of these big charities, and there's some amazing charities, and we've got 1% for the planet as a part of Blue Earth, and they're doing this amazing thing in terms of redistribution of finance to these incredible NGOs, and that is
there's got to be something to redistribute. But in the absence of a profit, there's nothing to.
100%, and that work needs to continue to happen. But if you want to be we're talking about sustainability. And in business, sustainability means that you actually made money. And if you're asking for money, be prepared to return that money with an interest.
To be a good business, you've got to be in business.
Yeah.
So you need to be profitable to do that. Two of the pieces we shared sort of back to back last year. One was about how we have a paid internship program, which I adore. We had almost 2,000 applicants last year. Some of those successful people are sat in the room today. Yay. But without the ability to pay our interns, we can't invest in the sector. So who else is going to?
Yeah.
And then flip side of that, I talk about how we need to make the environment sector an investable proposition. It has to be profitable. And there's still the same people who really love the article saying we pay people, like, well, we're not sure about making the profit from the planet.
Yeah.
You can't do one without the other.
No.
You can't elevate the sector. You can't find the innovative solutions that you've talked so eloquently about without paying for those talented people. And we're seeing it in terms of the level of performance we're seeing in the sector. We are getting... Of those 2,000, there were 50 Oxbridge firsts with distinctions in masters. We had international athletes apply. Incredible people that years ago wouldn't have looked at the environment sector. Yeah. But now, because they want to be working on something that matters, the most challenging things, and we've managed to put together this eclectic crew of incredible misfits and rebels and crazy ones, people are like, I want to be part of that. Yeah. And that's how you amplify and deliver change, I think.
100%. And that is where the real energy of Blue Earth has come to. And it took us whilst running it to realize that is, the innovation bit is what makes it sustainable, because philanthropy within climate has been there since the start. There are people that have that conscience, that have that spare income, and that's great. And that's where, that needs,
all of them a debt of gratitude, but it's not enough.
Yeah, and then you hear these amazing campaigns that go, well, how's it all going? Go, oh, well, the funding stopped. We're out. And what we're saying is, what horse are we backing? We think that the private sector and the startup community, and to your point, really create some energy and excitement and get real talent into it. You talk about the food sector. And where did all the talent go? They went into the people that sell you crisps, whereas they should have gone into sort of designing and building out health, you know, but that's just the way the world works. And so if you want to transform the way the world works, you've got to bring in the talent, which is throw a party that's positive, that's excited, and yeah, sometimes it is a bit naive.
The F1 of climate.
Yeah.
Of climate. That's what you need. You need to attract, because F1 can attract the best of the best.
Yeah.
The best of the best couldn't go into the health sector because there weren't the roles there.
Yeah.
You couldn't have gone into the environment before. So 2 of our most senior directors were women who'd done geography or environmental stuff at university. There wasn't a route for them to be successful in the environment. So they went into property and worked for FTSE 250 companies, and then went into PwC and ended up being one of their youngest directors. And now they've circled back to the environment because the roles are there now, thanks to us and people like Nattergal. And that's what I'm hopeful for, that in the next 5 years, we're the start of that process. You and I talked about legacy a little bit earlier, and I often get asked that, what do you want your legacy to be? And I struggle with that question because I really don't know. And I'm 41 and I don't want to think about that quite yet. Yeah. But where I'm kind of on, my holding answer is, I don't want one, because if what we are is such a small dot on the map that becomes the natural capital economy in the environment sector, that our $500 million transaction doesn't matter because there's been 50 more that are bigger than that, then all the problems are solved, aren't they?
Yeah. No, and that's it. And legacy, I think, is an underused tool to bring people that wouldn't otherwise be there in. What's the world you want to leave behind? And I think there's so much power in that. And I think you've got to be careful of who you say it to, because if
they have to understand the question and the ability to engage.
Yeah, and so what we're doing at Blue Earth is bringing the unsuspecting superheroes in to transformation. Like, and they don't, some of them know they are superheroes because they're just technically gifted or engineering minds, but why are they going to apply themselves to the nature restoration, or changing the way energy works, or changing the way we eat, and changing where we sleep, or how we build and built environment, all these amazing things, and so purposeful that we have to make sure that is attracting talent. And I think Blue Earth is throwing a party with the backdrop of a crisis, but with the hope of positive future. And what I really do believe in is that humankind innovates and innovates again on a natural ambition to find something better. And I think there is massive hope in that, because there is all the time better this, better that. This technology drive that we're on at the moment, it's almost terrifying where it's going to end up. But if you can get in on that talent and in on that agenda and bend it into having a positive impact on the world, and using things like nature as the metaphor, like that's worth holding an event for. And that's essentially what we're all about.
Absolutely love it. So we talked about Sebastian Vettel before, that we all love and adore. Who are some of the exciting people that you're either confirmed or thinking about for 25?
So it's getting sports people on stage, talking about commitment, talking about having that tenacity, to having that bravery and focus, and being told that you can't, but doing it anyway. We've got a few returning people, people that stood up on stage and said, I was going to run the length of Africa. This guy, Russ Cook, the hardest geezer, did that in 2002, stood on the stage in bare feet, said, I'm going to run the length of Africa. And he's done it. And he was in our offices this week, having done it. And so we love that sort of in that example of, you said it couldn't be done and I've gone and done it. He's got an amazing story. The investor community, we've got, people like Deborah Meaden have become huge champions of Blue Earth. And you see people like that on telly, you're like, I wonder if they're really like that. And she absolutely is. She is committed to entrepreneurialism, investing in the right thing and having a positive impact in the world. And she's bringing that investor fame to it, because a lot of investors don't want to be famous, and for good reason. They want to,
makes their life harder.
They want to operate in the shadows, and so we need to have those sort of champion.
I suppose she's your investor equivalent of John Elkington in the environmental space. That person who's got the authenticity, the longevity, the credibility to those communities. It's you convening again. You are that bringer together of people.
So we have 300 speakers, we have 5 stages, and we will probably have 100 of the usual suspects, and then it's who else. And how do you get someone from the world of sport to say that they belong here? Another Sebastian Vettel, someone in the climate world will go, well, why are they there? And then you're like, just have a listen to what their perception is.
Who's some of the dream ones that it's almost, it's too big a hope to want to get?
Yeah.
Who would make you go, how did we get them?
I think it's difficult to answer that because it's so broad, and in terms of, you know, who are we going after at the moment? You know, maybe if we mention it on this, then we'll actually get it. But I love the adventure type people, but sometimes I'm really dancing around that question because, you know, we put out that I think we've got some good names in the hat at the moment, but it's unsuspecting people that shouldn't, or not shouldn't, and that's the opposite. It's people that naturally don't belong in the climate space, but there they are talking about transformation, talking about change, talking about better, talking about how they got to, you know, how they became an Olympic champion.
They're the most exciting guests. So we had, in our world, there's often a conflict between conservationists and foresters. So some people think they're the devil. So we had Richard Kelly, who's managing director of Foresight Forestry Fund on. Amazing guy. He would say, I'm not a conservationist, I'm a forester, but we're doing it in a more sustainable, conservation-minded way. He was a brilliant guest, spoke eloquently, shared what they were doing. And I got a load of stick for inviting him. Oh, he's not an environmentalist. No, but he's brilliant, and he's improving things and iterating and doing things in a different way. And I think he was an unsurprising guest for us, a surprising guest for us, unexpected. And I really loved having that. And yeah, like you, we're trying to get as many divergent voices. And as long as it hits one of our themes of environment, impact, adventure, and togetherness, we're delighted with it.
Yeah, we've got a team of 4 that go out, and we call it hunting. You know, how do we get some? But the reality is that it's someone else who said, check out Blue Earth. It's something different. But, you know, people that are misunderstood, I love getting those sort of people that have got a sort of, you wouldn't know their story.
Does anyone jump to mind when you're thinking of that? Who a misunderstood character that you?
Well, I think a lot of politicians are misunderstood.
Yeah,
I think they go in with ideas and
we talked about George Eustace's episode earlier.
Yeah.
I'd never heard his sort of essential founder story of why he got into politics.
Yeah.
And I'd worked with him for years, like at a distance. So it was inspiring to hear that. You know, we're talking to Michael Gove's team about trying to get him on, and another example of misunderstood, I think.
Yeah.
Genuine guy from very, very humble, tough background who was trying to improve things for the better in the way he thought possible. So if you're listening, Michael, come on, it'd be good to have you.
You know, politicians are often misunderstood because of the world that we live in.
It's an impossible job as well.
Yeah, and I think that they get politicized, and so then that's our role is to say that business goes where politics can't, and because you don't get long enough in the job in politics, you know, and that I don't see that changing in my working life. But if you get these big institutions, you know, they're talking about, shareholders over a sort of 10 to 20 year, taking it. You know, and probably in your world, you're taking even longer. You're taking a huge...
A carbon project for us is a 100-year commitment.
Yeah, so you're taking big long-term commitments. So then you think, okay, who are the people in this world that can afford to take a long-term view? You know, I think we wouldn't mind a royal on Blue Earth stage because, you know, they can show up for climate. There's so many things they can't show up for, and there's so many things that they can't do. But, you know, being stewards of, you know,
the king would be pretty cool, right?
I think we should send him a letter. But the reality is that they can, that's something that they can show up for. And I think they do an amazing job at that. And then I think, you know, sometimes...
You had Prince William out with Nature Metrics this week, doing some stuff with school kids and things, which was great. And we've got Kat from Nature Metrics coming on soon, so that'll be exciting.
So we'll take a royal, we'll take more world champions, and they'll talk about how that they've scaled to the top of their industry. We love adventurers. We love an adventurer saying that they were planning to scale that mountain in 2023, but they haven't done it yet, but they're still...
You talking about better reminds me of Nim Sedai, the mountaineer.
Yeah.
And when they asked him about why the next mountain, he was like, because?
Yeah.
Because it's there. I don't know why, because it's there.
Because it's there. And that, again, becomes that whole resilience thing, because if you are going to create change, it's easier within the fabric of, you know, there's a lot of hardship in the world at the moment, and there's a lot of other things going on, whether it's cost of living in a sort of local sense or global, you know, security. Then you start thinking about, okay, well, where does climate fit in that? You know, if you're in government today, is it top 10? And I would be cynical enough to say it's probably not. You know?
It's that Eisenhower matrix, urgent and important.
Yeah.
I always remember when I was on stage once and asked, you know, well, why should money go to the environment and not to the NHS? And I went, it shouldn't. You know, if you said to me, this is a surgery on a loving member of your family, or this environmental restoration thing, of course you do that first. Yeah. It can't be either or, and that's why it can't be something that the public purse has to pick up.
But then, but then you get these relentless people that go, but my only vision is to, what Blue Earth is trying to essentially do is find solutions to regenerate the natural world. And so if that's your North Star, when someone goes, well, actually, there's cost in the NHS and we're going to dial up our security, and there's cost of living crises, and you think of all of the lobbying that goes on to maintain the status quo. The system as it stands works for a select group of people, and they're getting incredibly wealthy, and they are thinking about, how do I hang on to that? And
yeah.
All that, we talk about lobbying within nature, and we talk about all of that sort of stuff. You think about what lobbying is going on at big industry level. The people that say, just leave it as it is, because it's actually paying quite a lot of tax to your situation.
Yeah, and for them, success can be, just wait a minute. Why not give it another look? What about another feasibility study? It's like living Yes Minister.
Yeah.
It's really easy to pause something, to question, to delay. Actually starting something's really hard.
And so then you need these relentless North Star people that say, we're finding solutions to regenerate the natural world. And so with all the kicks that are going on to say, if we want to get renewable energy, which, by the way, from what I've learned through being involved in Blue Earth, we're there. Renewable energy is there. And you think of who doesn't want it to be there. And you think about a status quo, and you think about how governments they've really got to get bold now. I think the technology's there. Do we have enough energy?
It's the cheapest way for us to provide fuel.
Yeah.
Like it's just better. And the only people that are stopping that right now are, we're not investing in the grid enough, and local people who say, well, I don't like looking at wind turbines.
Yeah.
Our general counsel at the parent company yesterday had this brilliant line about, we should offer, you can either have a nuclear power station, a coal power station, or a wind turbine. It's entirely your choice. Which of the three would you like? Yeah. Whereas if people just say no to everything, they don't pick a solution.
Yeah.
No to everything isn't a better answer. It's a status quo.
Yeah.
Well, I could talk to you for hours. It's been an absolute pleasure having you in the shoot room. Our time is coming to an end, so I do have to ask you my final and favourite question. What's the one question I haven't asked you wish I had?
I think you've been very kind with your questionings. I think it's, I don't think I think you've covered it all. But to give you an answer to that on the spot, what haven't you asked me? I think I'm pretty happy with what you asked me.
Okay.
What should I be saying to that?
Usually you see it pass through people's head. There's a question that they go, oh no, I don't want to be asked that, and they kick it aside. Was there one that popped into your head and you're like, no, I don't want to be asked that one, and moved it away?
In terms of, what's the question you haven't asked me that you want to ask?
Oh God, no one's spun that one back on.
Yeah. The one you think you couldn't ask me, from everything you've heard.
There was a couple we were going through. I guess I paused and didn't, because you had wonderful flows on things. We touched on like the appetite to risk and things like that. We didn't touch on the. You said you wiped out a few times.
Yeah.
So like, what was the biggest, most painful wipeout that really stung?
Well, so the biggest, most painful lesson within my working life is not having a plan for the worst case scenario. I think that's a really clear bit of advice I'd give to anyone starting a business. Like, can you afford the worst case scenario? And can you afford not to think about it? And the answer, often people go, oh, that would be so bad, I don't want to think about it. And I think if it's your business, you need to think about it, and you need to then think about it again and have a plan for that situation. And when you can handle that situation, you can take some risk. And I think in my 30s, my sort of ambition for to keep up, keep growing, keep sort of progressing in my working life, I stopped thinking about the worst case scenario, and I invented a festival that was actually pretty successful. If you went to that festival, you'd have loved it, because we had more loos than anyone else, we had more bars than anyone else, we had more everything than anyone else, and it just lost so much money. And the reality is, I didn't have a plan for that worst case scenario. I just thought, if you build it well, they'll turn up, and that
Feel the dreams.
Yeah, and that what I learned in that world is, just remember that age-old situation. Can you handle the downside? And if you can handle the downside, then that enables you to sort of really go off and take risks that other people will think that's a risk. But as long as you've covered the downside, you're probably in a good place.
Amazing. What a great answer. Will, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We love everything Blue Earth and wish you all the best for 25 and onwards.
I'll see you there.
Thank you.
All right.